Welcome. I'm Beth Goodhue. I'm the Associate Director for Faculty Engagement at the Center for the Advancement of Teaching. I'm here with many of my colleagues who have helped make this possible. Kim DeBacco and Kamiko Haas and Michelle Gaston from CAT and OTL, Online Teaching and Learning, will be helping to monitor the chat. So if you have questions, be sure to post them there. But because we expect a relatively large group of participants, the chat's going to be the easiest way to get your questions answered and for us to keep track of what's going on in the session. There will be definitely times for you to interact and voice your questions in smaller groups and in a large group, but the chat will be running the entire time we're here. We have 3 faculty members who've joined us as conversation starters for today: Ashley Sanders Garcia from Digital Humanities, Tony Friscia from Integrative Biology and Physiology, GE Clusters, and Clarice Ayalo from Electrical Engineering. So we thank them too. And we thank all of you for taking time out of your day to come and join us to talk through strategies for remote teaching. We know you're all putting in a lot of extra time these days, and we really value those efforts and want to help support you every way that we can. Okay, here we go. Quickly about the meeting protocol. When you arrived, you probably saw the recording announcement. You received information about that in your RSVP information as well. We're recording this session to post to our website. If you would prefer not to be recorded, you can turn off your video. You can rename yourselves. There were some other instructions in the RSVP about that. Please keep your mic muted unless you're speaking so that we don't get a lot of background noise or feedback. And then the chat, like I said, will be moderated, and it's the best way to reach out to us kind of in an immediate fashion. There's also a digital hand you can raise under your managed participants. So if you want to speak that way, you can do that as well. Okay. A quick overview of today's session. So we're here to explore strategies for fostering interactivity, and you'll learn about this with us through demonstration and through conversations with your peers, and especially through a dialogue with invited guests. So we imagined this session as a conversation, and we've tried to keep that feel, even though our RSVP numbers have been trickling up, which we're super excited about, and yet has forced us to rethink a bit on the fly how to do interactivity in larger groups. So it's actually a real world demonstration of exactly why you're here. So we'll be using a combination of breakout rooms and the larger group for discussion. And then again, the chat, feel free to drop questions there at any time. Or if I'm talking too fast, you can flag that there too. I'm working on that. I'm just so excited to be here. And then at the end of the session, we'll help you access resources, including a short guide for active learning for remote teaching that I will drop into the chat right now so that I don't forget. And then we'll be able to give you access to the slides. I'm going to just stop sharing. And then quickly drop the active learning guide into the chat. So UCLA disabled active links in chat, so you'll need to copy and then paste if you want to open the document. We'll be sending out these links later though, so you don't necessarily need to do that right this minute. Okay, so really quickly to get us started, since we do have a lot of folks here with us today, we're going to do a quick poll to get a sense of your interest and why you're here and what you'd like to talk about. So I'm going to launch that now. This is something that many of you have probably played with already within Zoom, but it's a great feature for interactivity. You can build these polls before your Zoom sessions or live while you have them running. And we're going to just take a couple minutes for you to tell us what you're most interested in working on. You can check all that apply here.
Just a quick note for those of you who are co-hosts in this session, you won't be able to answer the poll.
Thanks, Michelle. Okay, we're about halfway there. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to let this keep ticking up, and then I'll review results. Okay, we're holding steady at about 80, so here we go. You can see that there was quite a lot of interest in managing the active learning features within Zoom while you're in a synchronous session, but also people are obviously interested in asynchronous opportunities to interact with their students and foster interaction among them. See a good, healthy interest in group projects as well. If you're here with something specific for your class, there are a couple different ways that you can flag that you'd like follow-up consultation from us at CAT. You can email us at consult@teaching.ucla.edu. We'll follow up with you one-on-one. You can also flag your individual questions during the breakout process, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So Zoom's polling feature is limited to multiple choice questions and true-false questions. If you're interested in doing live polling with your students and you want to use other question types, you may want to look at UCLA's online polling tool at Mentimeter, Poll Everywhere, and you can run those by sharing your screen, your browser, and students can see results with those kinds of polling tools as well. But what we're going to do, we only have a limited amount of time here today, and we want to be sure that both our faculty guests get a chance to talk with you and that you get a chance to talk with all of us. To jumpstart that process, I'm going to break you up into breakout rooms now. And we're hoping that because there are a lot of you, that the breakout process will help to consolidate some of the key questions that you're most interested in working on together. So what will happen when you go to the breakout room is you'll be in a smaller group of maybe 6 or 8, I think, people. And I will show you really quickly. I've created a Google document. Sorry, I need to pull it up in the browser first. That you'll be able to work on in your smaller groups. There are a bunch of different ways that you can use a Google Doc or a Google Sheet for interactivity with your students. You really want to be thinking before you pick a tool, what are you looking for your students to be able to learn, and what are your goals for the process, and then you're finding a tool that kind of helps to fit your learning goals. So what type of Google document or sheet or what you would do to scaffold your breakout process may change as a result of what your goals are. But what I've done prior to the session today, and I will drop the link. Oh, Clarice is already in it because I think maybe someone else shared it. I will share it if I haven't done that. You'll have access to this document.
They popped up the link, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I will do that. And then you'll be able to find the space for your room, and you'll be able to work together with your group to think through these questions. You can have someone within your group share the document within the smaller groups share screen function, or you can just have it open in a secondary window. You'll be talking about interactivity strategies that have worked well for you and tips you want to share, and then any challenges you're facing and things that you're interested in talking with our panelists about. Our panelists will be spread across rooms, and I'm also going to try to spread out the CAT and OCL support staff and SEALs and folks like that, so that if you have specific questions while we're in the rooms, we'll be in the rooms for maybe like 7 or 8 minutes. You can actually get some of your questions answered right now. And then we'll regroup. Our 3 panelists will share some of their insights and riff on what they've heard in the rooms that they were part of. And then we'll open things up for a larger conversation. And the Google Doc is already in the chat. Thank you, Kim. Okay, so I think that what I'm now going to do is something I recommend when you're doing this for your students is to put the prompt and the things you just talked about and the things you want them to do into the group chat before they leave the breakout rooms, because they won't be able, you won't be able to talk to them as a large group except by broadcasting short little messages once they're gone. So I'm going to paste this in here as well. So you can see those questions. So if for some reason you can't pull up the Google document, you can see the prompts 1 and 2 that your peers will be talking about. And again, there's a link to the document here. You may want to elect someone who will record for the group if you don't all want to have the document open at the same time. And we'll ask for folks to share out as well. So we may not hit all of the rooms, but we're going to try and get as many of your questions hit on as possible. Are there any questions before I send you all off to your breakout rooms? Okay.
How long did you say we'd be in the breakout rooms?
I'm guessing maybe 7, 8 minutes. I'm going to keep track of time and try not to leave you isolated there. It may end up being closer to, yeah. We want to give you a chance for an actual conversation though with your neighbors and with the folks that I'm going to try to distribute across from SEALs and CAT and other spaces. So Zoom is going to randomly assign everyone before you go out, I'm going to move our panelists into 3 different rooms, so they'll definitely be spread out. And then if you are one of our friends in teaching and learning services, you may find yourself whisked through a wormhole and into another room as I try to shuffle folks around and give sort of support to as many rooms as possible. Shauna, I can see you laughing because that's going to be you down a wormhole. And
well, I wanted to share one tip we learned from this morning session is there are a lot of lurkers and listeners, so you might want to assign groups to be bigger than you think they should be.
okay, that's
Yeah.
good, because I was going to try for 10, and that should give you groups of maybe 7 or 8. So
That sounds good. That sounds
okay,
good.
thanks, Shauna. And hopefully those of you who didn't know you were being drafted to be additional support are okay with that process. So yeah, so thanks everyone. We'll give this a shot, and then I'll pull you back in 10 minutes or less. I just have to get to my breakout room function. And Ashley. Okay, I think folks are kind of spread out, so we're going to open all the rooms. And I can pop in and visit you too. And you can ask for help, and there's an ask for help button that you'll see once you're inside of your room. Okay. Thanks everyone. I hope those conversations were helpful. You've been muted again now that you arrived back in the larger room. And what we're going to do now is give our faculty guests a chance to sort of share some of their insights that they planned, but also respond to anything that was coming up in the rooms where they were having conversations. We'll start with that, and then after we've heard from all 3 of our guests, we'll open it up for conversation. You can ask them questions about their strategies, but you can also share items from the Google Doc. And I'll ask maybe some of our support folks, Michelle or Kimiko, if you want to kind of skim through the Google Doc and see if there's anything we want to be sure we pull out and surface for the larger group. That would be super helpful. And Clarice, does anyone want to start in particular? Do you want to start? Would you like to start?
I'll go for it. So hi, I'm Clarice. I was one of the conversation starters, and I'm going to share with you one strategy that is working well, and I'm going to share the one challenge that has been mentioned multiple times. So I'll start with the challenge. It was mentioned that one of the hardest parts was gauging the student reactions, engaging how much we were helping them building their own knowledge, right? Maybe we have to adapt in the way that we assess, not only at the end of the term, but maybe we have to learn how to assess the pace of the lecture and so forth in a different way as we're going along. One of the interactivity strategies that have been working well and that I very much like personally is that someone mentioned laying down ground rules for student participation from the start, right? How one was or was not supposed to be interacting during lecture, even assigning someone to take care of that class's chat function so that questions could be relayed to the main lecturer in a timely way. And I'll stop here, I think.
Great. Thank you. And then we can cycle through. Ashley, maybe do you want to share some of your insights, and then we'll move on to Tony, and then we'll kind of open things up. We wanted to leave a good chunk of time for communication and conversation too.
Sure. Did you want us to share about some of our own activities and too? Okay. So our conversation focused on both interacting with the instructor, but also kind of facilitating student interaction and engagement with each other. And so we talked about, of course, using the Google Documents, the way that we were actively in our own breakout session. But we talked about using Google Documents to also collect collaboratively generated questions to kind of seed a lecture or a conversation in class. Another idea was to stump the expert, to ask the students to stump the expert as a reading response strategy, where they pose questions to the instructors that they think are really challenging. Again, a way to increase student engagement, interest, curiosity. And then the final thing that we talked about is using Slack. Slack is something that I use both in my in-person classes and now in my online instruction as well. And it works well for both because it provides a quick way for students to engage with each other and with the instructor. because I'm in the digital humanities, my students are learning both content and tech skills, and that raises a lot of questions for them. And so Slack gives them kind of a nice informal way to communicate again with each other or with myself. So those kinds of things came out of, oh yes, can I quickly clarify what Slack is? Sure. So Slack is basically an instant messaging system, sort of. So it gives you a way to kind of group conversations, because you can create things that are called channels. So for example, I have a channel called Code Questions. So as my students are using their programming skills in Python, they run into problems, they can share that within that channel, and other people can check that channel and help them troubleshoot those issues. You could set up your channels in any way that makes sense for your course. And I've also found it reduces email burden as well. It's a great way to prioritize my students' questions so that they don't get buried in the avalanche that is my inbox. Yeah, it's a communication tool. Exactly, that's a little more powerful than just a forum. Yeah, you can share. It's a great way to share resources, to share, I mean, even things like PDFs. I mean, it instantly gets sent to the students. They don't have to search their inbox to try and find those materials, and they're all grouped together with the rest of the course content. Okay, what is the advantage of Slack over Zoom chat? It's that it's always available, exactly. I have it on both my mobile device and on my laptop. And so, you know, if a student's question comes in, you know, in the evening, normally I don't respond to email, but if it's something that takes me 2 seconds to answer, it's just a quick way to get back to them right away, and I don't have to worry about leaving them hanging. You can also set hours. I did this when I was teaching in an in-person class and just let students know, you know, after 6 p.m. I'm not going to check Slack, but I'll check it the next morning. So just kind of give them, set some expectations around how you'll use that tool. Yes, it is separate from CCLE. UCLA does support it though, exactly. The other nice thing is Slack keeps a record of all of these conversations that you have within it. And if you don't actively record your Zoom session, you don't have that chat history that happens during that interaction that you have via Zoom. So Slack does keep a record. It makes it really easy to kind of go back and see what people suggested, what links were shared, those kinds of things. I just wanted to share a couple of other things really quickly, and then we'll move on. So I am also preparing what I'm now calling an intentionally online class. This summer, it's an introduction to digital humanities, and the class has just gotten so much interest from students that it's now up to 120 students in our in-person classes. So it's gotten quite large. That's the largest that we can take because we can only have 2 TAs. So we've developed this online version of the class to try running it in the summer, which allows students to, you know, go after their internships back home, wherever they may be, some summer study abroad, and still participate in the course and get that course credit. So as I've had much more time to develop that course than we do for our current quarter, I've been able to develop a few more interactive activities for the asynchronous part of the course, which was the part that I was most concerned about, actually, is trying to keep students engaged when I'm not talking with them in real time. So I'm just going to share a couple of things, and then we'll bring it back to the whole group. The first thing is, now I also have to mention this is built in Canvas, but you can do a lot of the same things in CCLE. So if that's your platform that you're using, all of this is still available. This is the course syllabus. It's built in a tool called Sutori, which you can access for free. And it just gives you a different way to develop your syllabus. So I've embedded, this is just a sample video that I did last summer during the workshop, but I'll put a more professional video in there. It's just a quick introduction to me as an instructor. My TAs will introduce themselves, but you can also, in addition to all the different things that you'd normally include in your syllabus, you can include things like a little quiz to kind of see how students are engaging. Did they actually read all the way through to get down to the bottom of the syllabus? in this case, do they understand academic honesty? I love the idea of a digital scavenger hunt through the syllabus, but I haven't quite figured out how to structure that yet. So if I come up with ideas, I'll be sure to share. One other thing I'll mention, and then I'll turn it back over to Beth, is a tool called Hypothesis. You could also use a tool that Matthew Fisher from English has developed here at UCLA called the annotation tool. They do very similar things. They allow your students to annotate a document collaboratively. So this gives them a way to see what other students are kind of picking out of the material, how they're responding to it. And then you can quickly scroll through and kind of see, you know, what do the students understand? What are they picking up? Are there passages that you really wanted them to make note of, but they kind of skimmed over it and didn't quite get out some of the key points that you were looking for them to digest? So just another way to kind of build some interactivity into an asynchronous course. So this might be something that you could use down the line when you've got a little bit more time to plan.
Great, thank you so much, Ashley. We'll kick things over to Tony, and then and then we'll probably open things up. Okay.
Hey everyone. So I'm teaching a class this quarter that's kind of a small upper division seminar that also was supposed to have a lab component as well. It's an upper division anatomy course. So I'm finding I'm having kind of the normal sorts of interactivity sorts of things that people have been talking about, but also I'm trying to figure out ways to do interactivity for this kind of lab component that we normally would have. And so a couple of things. One is I'm also using Google Docs a lot, and I use them a lot. Like, I don't know how many people were in the student panel before this, and I was happy to see one of the students in the student panel was one of my students from this quarter, and she was saying I was doing well, so yay. But she, she said, you know, one thing that she likes is when they go to a breakout room is to have something to do in there. And so as an example for that, I'll show you a couple things that I use Google Docs for. Let's see if I can share my screen here. And I can. Now I just need to find the right screen to share. Okay, there we go. So here's a Google Doc I put out the first day that had like student names and emails and things like that, so they could get in touch with people. But I also had them do like kind of like icebreaker sorts of things and stuff like that. One thing I found with this that's interesting is that, you know, they got each other's emails. And one thing I'm finding is that they're doing a lot of interactivity around you. And by that, I mean, you know, like they took this email list and they emailed everybody and they said, hey, you know, if you want to be part of a group text, let us know your phone number. And they basically set up a group text where they're talking with each other and stuff like that I'm not part of, which I'm fine with actually. And what's one nice thing about it is that they're using that as a way to kind of help each other. And then if they come up with a question that is like stumps them all, then they go into like my discussion forums and stuff and they ask that question once, which was really interesting. The other thing is, I'm going to go into here real quick. Another thing I use the discussion forum or the Google Docs for that was a little more complex, just to show you one more quick thing here. Yeah, here we go. Is this, so, you know, as an activity, what I did was put up slides like this. So I used the Google Slides instead of just the Google Docs. And then they can do more complex sorts of things with this. So I would put up a picture like this, and then I would say, okay, you know, and I would sign each breakout group, a different slide. And then I basically said, okay, fill in as many things as you remember on this slide, right? And like they would add arrows and add labels and things like that. And so it was a quick and easy way to do that sort of thing. Another thing I did was if you use Google Slides, it's much more free form, so they can do things like concept maps and stuff like that. So I had them doing concept maps. So I had them doing an easy concept map of a paragraph from Harry Potter, but then I had them doing more complex sorts of concept maps with paragraphs. Oh, this isn't one of them. Well, I had paragraphs from the papers they were reading that week, and they were doing concept maps of that. And they can do that all in Google Slides, and they were doing that as a group, which was nice to see. So the other, oops, nope, I wanted to close that one. So let me get out of this. If I can. Oh, there we go. So yeah, those are the things that I'm coming up with. In our group, people were talking about these sorts of things, like the sorts of sharing and having things for them to do, like very specific sorts of tasks when they're going into those breakout rooms and stuff like that. And I think that was one of the key things that came up. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Can I add something real quick before we open? Can I? Okay,
Yes.
before we go to the whole group and open the discussion, I just want to mention something which is not an endorsement because I have not yet used it, but this tool has been mentioned in the chat, which is a tool called Perusal, which has been, it's perusal.com, and it has been developed by Eric Mazur at Harvard as a means of doing collaborative, it's actually an alternative to this hypothesis e-reader, where people can collaborate on videos, on documents asynchronously before they come to class. I can, if I can share my screen, oh no, I cannot share my screen. Oh my God. So it's called perusal.com. I have not yet used it, but I'll be trying to use it, and I'm convinced given Eric Mazur's explanation.
We just added the link in the chat. Thanks, Clarice. Okay. So thank you so much to all of our panelists for sharing. We have about 20 minutes left where we can have conversation and take more questions. So if there was something that came up in your breakout room that you're interested in sharing, or you have other pending questions, things you want to ask either of our panelists or of the larger group. So I'm here from CAT, but there's also lots of other folks here in our audience from the different computing units on campus, from online teaching and learning. We might have guests from disabilities and computing. I'm not sure if Travis is here, but there's definitely, if you have specific questions, I know I have the chat open and saw some questions about classes even larger than 100. What about if your class is up to 250 or more beyond our discussion section? So I'm going to kick that out to the larger group and ask if anyone has been working with classes of that scale and how that's been working for you. I can pull up some other questions too, but I think I have it set so that we can take questions in the chat, and we can also have you just unmute yourselves and ask questions if you'd like to do so.
One of the questions that came up in the breakout room I was in had to do with using breakout rooms and the time that it takes for the instructor to go in and out of breakout rooms. That seemed to really not be an easy thing to manage. Any thoughts?
It's definitely a process, like, like there is a little pause to it, but I don't find it too disruptive. I mean, and the students have kind of gotten used to it now, and they've gotten used to like me, like kind of creepily showing up in their little breakout rooms. And so I think they've like, it isn't particularly smooth, you're right, but they get used to it.
Ray, you had your hand up.
I was just going to say the opposite. I feel really intrusive because of how cumbersome it is. It's not like drifting around a room and kind of eavesdropping. You're there or you're not, and it's very crude. I mean, you just boom, you're there. And I just feel like that doesn't work. If you really want them to have a discussion without you, you have to not be there.
Oh no, for sure that's the case. For sure, I agree with that. Like it's super weird. Like when you show up there, like as this weird angel. But like I do think that it's like when you do like you can use it as a way to check in on groups, and so I would pop in on groups from time to time. But you're right. I mostly let them talk on their own, and then like kind of stayed out of it. That's the time when like during a long class I can go, use the restroom.
We did get a question about whether you can pre-assign students to breakout rooms, and the answer to that is yes. In the Zoom settings, you have the option to pre-construct the breakout rooms if you have either a roster of people you want to upload to it, or you can, if you're managing your Zoom meetings through CCLE, I think that they'll be like linked to the roster and the participant list, so you can manage the rooms that way. You can have them either always in the same groups if you wanted to do that, or you could just sort of pre-assign and then rotate if you wanted to be managing them at that level. And I saw in the chat too that folks from SEALS said there's folks in life science who've been doing 300 plus classes, and if you want to chat with them, we can help arrange that for you.
There's a question in the chat about, is there anything that's better through Zoom than in-person classes? And I'd like to offer one thing that seems to be working for me. And I put it in the chat. So I teach in engineering, and I sent students to a breakout room to perform some calculations. Each group was given a different value of a parameter. They put their answers into a Google sheet that then generated a graph of the results that they had just calculated. And then we came back together and talked about the behavior of that graph. That would have been much more cumbersome to do in person.
Also, I just wanted to add to that. We just had a session with a student panel, and a similar type of question was asked of the students. And one of the things that they had mentioned was some of the material are more readily accessible in this kind of environment, because we post links or we provide them with the slides and things that I think just generally best practices are, as instructors, we're kind of forced to do that. So I think the students do appreciate that a lot of the material and these kind of things are a lot more easily accessible for them.
We had another question in the chat about what kinds of collaborative projects that would span across multiple class periods can be facilitated with these platforms. I asked about that in the poll, and then we haven't talked about it too much yet. I might ask Ashley if you're willing to talk a little bit about the DH101 team projects that you've done. I can talk in general about some team projects, but I figure you're here, and if you're willing to share, maybe.
Yeah, sure. So in the Introduction to Digital Humanities class, it's an upper division introduction, and students have to do original research. They select a data set, and they work with the same team throughout the quarter, and they do a series of readings, and then they work with all the different software and technology that we teach them to analyze their data set and present an argument at the end by building a website. So that's just a quick snapshot of the project. What we do is we link them up either through Slack, or we teach them simple tools like Trello boards, which is a project management software based on the Japanese Kanban system, which is a series of cards that you kind of move from your to-do to in progress to done. And it also allows you to assign different members of the team to those different tasks. So it helps students keep track of who's doing what in terms of their research project, so that they make sure that all the tasks are getting done on time. It allows them to follow up with each other. So that's a tool, again, you can use either in an in-person class or in an online version.
I've definitely found it helpful in my own classes when managing group projects to be kind of clear about asking students to either select from pre-assigned roles, that I give them an option of these 4 roles for your team, so that someone's accountable for different pieces, and you can rotate students through the roles at different times if that fits your kind of learning goals. But having a clear sense of who's responsible for what and when can be really helpful, and also having ways for students to be accountable to one another, but also to you, so they can do things like having them do a peer evaluation and the self-assessment as part of the group work process. I think that can be extra valuable. I haven't done it here on Zoom, but I think that when you're not physically face-to-face, it can actually probably be even more important to maintain those kinds of accountability structures. And I'm seeing we're getting asked to share out lists of resources. We will be putting together the recording, slides, and a resource sort of list for folks. Some of the resources we've discussed today are in the active learning guide that I shared at the beginning, which I'll drop into the chat again. Not all of them are there yet, and so we can add to that resource list, and also send something out specifically for people who RSVP'd to this session. Somebody asked if someone named Amanda had offered to talk more about perusal, and then we have a couple minutes if Amanda would like to talk more about perusal. We can kick that over now.
Yes, hi, I'm Amanda Fries. I'm a lecturer in the microbiology department. So we read a lot of primary literature, a lot of scientific articles in my class, and some of the students have some experience, others have none. And I was really concerned that for those who don't have any experience, that they would have an even harder time understanding these articles, given like the lack of easy interaction in class. And so I wanted to find some kind of annotation tool, and I saw Hypothesis, but it seemed like, as far as I could tell, there didn't seem like any way to track whether or not students were annotating. And I wanted to incentivize the annotations by assigning some kind of scoring. So I found this other tool called Perusal, and can I share my screen? Because if so, I can show you what it looks like. Perusal is, as was mentioned before, a collaborative annotation tool, but the reason, sorry, I can't hear you, Liz. Is it, okay.
Yeah, you should be able to share now.
Okay, great. So let's see. It's collaborative annotations, but what I like about it is that they allow you, if you want, to assign points for different things, and it's also very easy for students to earn points in a number of ways, like asking questions, leaving thoughtful comments, answering other questions, upvoting different things. And so this is the first time I've used it, but I'm very happy with it. You can see that they give you quite a lot of analytics here. And if you open the document, you can see that on the right-hand side here, all of the different annotations that my students have left. I started by asking them some questions that they could answer. So for instance here, this was when the student asked. So they asked a question, other students can upvote this. I responded here. There was sort of like a conversation that was ongoing. And you can just click through to see all of the different things that students have asked. So they are having conversations about the paper, like quite a few, as you can see. And they're answering each other's questions, which I think is great. And then for me, it helps me see very quickly what issues they are having with certain aspects of the paper, which I can then address in lecture. And you don't have to use the scoring component, but I've made it like very lax so that they're basically, as long as they annotate a couple of times, they'll get full credit. But the software itself is pretty advanced, where you can like weight certain things differently, like logging in early, leaving like thoughtful comments, which is sort of like a black box of the algorithm. I'm not sure how they decide what's thoughtful. So I just made it super easy to encourage them to leave a few comments, but I think that it's been very helpful. And from the types of conversations that they've been having, I feel like they're delving quite deeply into the papers, much more than they have in the past when I didn't use this tool. And I think that we just kind of skimmed through the papers to answer the homework questions that I gave them.
Great, thank you so much.
And for someone that asked, yes, it's free. I don't want to take up too much time. Someone asked if you could show how to annotate, but if you go to the website, they give you a very easy to use demo of how to use the software if you decide to use it. So I encourage you to check it out. And then making the class was very easy, and you can upload pretty much any kind of material. So just check it out. It's easy to use and easy to sign up.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have other questions or other tips and tricks folks want to share, things that have been working well?
I have a oh.
No, go.
I have a quick one, which is a workaround, which is a crappy workaround, but it helps. I am usually logged in through different devices. One in which I see the students in tile format, and the other one where I can see like my screen in the chat. And just having more screens, it helps somehow.
Yeah, and something you said earlier, Beth, just reminded me in terms of facilitating group work. I mean, this is challenging even in in-person classes, let alone being distributed. So one of the things that I developed even in the in-person classes, because as I mentioned, that particular class is very large, I have a survey that I ask students to fill out a couple of times in the quarter so I can check in on how the groups are functioning. But it doesn't just ask, you know, to rate their own kind of contributions and those of their teammates. I also ask if there are any challenges that the team is facing. And then another step is I ask them to write out how they are, when and how they are going to address those challenges. So asking them to actually plan the steps for how to resolve some of the issues that do come up in teamwork. And I've found that that really helps both teams function more effectively, and it gives me a clue as to how they're working. And it's just a quick, did you complete it, didn't you complete it, scoring system. And it just makes it quick and easy for me to skim through all of those responses and just flag any of the teams that aren't functioning well and meet with them in particular.
That's great, thank you.
Hi, I just joined. I forgot.
Hi.
And then I just remember the time.
Welcome. We're just taking some questions, and if folks had tips or tricks they want to share, so feel free to share if you'd like to.
Well, I really wanted to attend the first meeting but it was in the middle of my teaching this morning. Well, I taught from 12:30 to 1:45. Hi, Muriel. Hi, just see you. But so basically, because I wanted to see what students, and I was wondering if that particular meeting is being recorded and we can access
Yeah,
it.
they've been recorded, so if you're interested in that. I think some of the things that was interesting to me was that students shared interactivity strategies that they thought were helpful. So I thought that Tony's point about, in particular, wanting to have something to do when they're in a breakout room and something to do when they're in synchronous meetings, so that it feels like you're not just staring, into a Zoom with nothing sort of structuring that time for you. Really quickly, I will pull up the active learning guide that I was talking about, and I'll just give you a sense of what's there. Some of you are already in the document, but this will also be got a question about Mentimeter and some other tools. So this is a sort of living document you're able to access a view-only version from the link that I shared. But what this document does is it tries to help instructors match face-to-face interactive learning strategies that you may already be familiar with remote teaching strategies that you can try. So it starts from everything like, how do I get my students to ask questions? And that's a fairly basic feature of Zoom that many people have already mastered, but if you're new to Zoom, it's still spelled out here. If you want to write on a whiteboard or a blackboard, what are some of your options? Connecting another device, like Clarice mentioned, is one option to create sort of a writing space or a whiteboard that you're sharing with your students. But there's a lot of different features here, and here's the polling tools. So UCLA encourages folks to use our own homegrown online polling tool and Poll Everywhere. For full features, Poll Everywhere requires a subscription. Many folks use Mentimeter. I'm not 100% sure if Mentimeter is UCLA's current approved list of tools, but they all work similarly in the sense that they have multiple different question types, including multiple choice, like the poll that we did when we first got here into the session. But there are also open-ended options where students can type in a text response, and you can either see those display in a scroll, or you can see them. Sometimes some of the tools allow you to project them into word clouds and other kinds of visualizations as well. There's all kinds of other tools and resources and strategies here in this guide for you. So I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of how that's organized. If you have suggestions about either strategies that you use in remote teaching that you want to be represented in the guide, or things you've been trying to figure out how to do that you used to do in your face-to-face classes, we'd welcome your input about how to keep expanding on the guide. Muriel asked about, or should we be worried about,
Yeah. Can I comment on that too?
Kim.
Thanks, Muriel, for your question. I think what's guiding the UCLA's approved list is partly concerns about student privacy and also giving third-party companies access to students' data. And if you're going to use those kind of tools that are not on the list, you need to check their terms of use and what they do with student data. I think that's some of the concerns. I mean, these are things that get negotiated and talked about when they do the licensing, if they decide to license to campus. So yeah, I noticed, students should obviously give their approval, they're okay for their email address to be shared, or they do that within their groups just voluntarily. They agree to do that. Those kind of concerns surround things that are not on the list. Yeah.
Mentimeter is totally, completely anonymous. So I don't know.
Yeah,
it's not like Poll Everywhere, so they don't give their emails or anything. So that was one of the reasons that I liked it. And I said, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not into absolutes here either, and there are great tools. I mean, I'm just so impressed at how Ashley has used some, tools in her course as well. And but these are concerns that others on campus have been debating, and that's as much as I know, and I do agree, Adrian, that the fact that something isn't on the list doesn't mean you can't use it, but you need to be aware that the concerns are around what kind of data are these companies collecting on students, and to what extent might it move across into FERPA concerns or not. But, we can make that judgment too, in terms of that's something we have to weigh up with, wanting to do more interactivity.
And I think especially in the cases where your students would have to sign up for an account of some sort before they could participate in the tool, whatever it is, those would be ones that you want to be very extra sort of careful about. Not all the tools that we've discussed today were on the list. Google Docs are definitely UCLA approved, so G Suite. UCLA prefers to have students be logged in through their G.UCLA if they're sharing course-related work with one another or with you. They should all have that account for free, and it gives them access to G Suite's robust all the applications that are affiliated, including slides and sheets and things like that. Slack, I think UCLA does have a relationship with. I'm not sure about Perusal. Hypothesis was able to be integrated with CCLE as an external tool. There was a kind of a bridge to the LMS built, but it's not a fully UCLA supported tool. So we got some mixed messaging around that one for annotation in terms of especially how much tech support you'd be able to get from your local CCLE support. The answer was that for external tools, not much probably right now, because they're providing a lot of other kinds of support. But yeah, it's an evolving list of resources, which ones are kind of on the approved list and what allows them to be on that approved list.
I'm not sure if there is a disapproved list, Muriel.
Yes, is there something that we're not supposed to use?
I think anything that requires students to pay, which is kind of probably obvious to everyone, that is probably the biggest one that I could think of, but I would think that others might have some other thoughts on that.
I think social media
doesn't require students to give any information, and it's free to them. I pay for a premium account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think tools like social media tools and things like that, where their information is public, and where they're collecting data on the students, those are the kinds of tools they'd like, that the university would like faculty to avoid.
Yeah. Mm.
We're nearly out of time. I want to respect people.
I wanted to say that I found out that when students open up their Zoom account, which is a UCLA sponsored thing, then they become totally public, part of this contact list, which has a lot of implications in terms of privacy. So I found this out because I've been trying to organize breakout rooms that are pre-assigned, so that I can break up the room in teams that I've actually gotten students to work in teams on a group project, but I want to also have the option to break up the room a bit randomly for some different activities. And it turns out that to do pre-assigned breakout rooms, all students have to open up their UCLA sponsored account, which means that they're part of the Zoom UCLA list. And the problem there is, because of privacy and the fact that anybody can check if they're at a Zoom meeting at any particular point in time. And so this is just extremely problematic, but they have the option to basically, if they're being stalked because of this UCLA Zoom list, and they can.
It's not good.
No, it's not. They can basically ban some interaction for unwanted solicitation and so on. But anyway, yeah, it's pretty scary.
Yeah, well, that's something, I definitely wasn't aware of that, and that's something that we can refer up and try and get some.
This is an onion that keeps revealing, peeling back. I'll certainly report this on to
yeah. And Adrian's saying we can take it up
Yeah.
with campus council and
if they don't already know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was really taken by the question earlier about group work, and I think this is a fairly obvious thing to say, but I would be using my live sessions to have groups check in with each other in their breakout groups. If we're working on a collaborative project over a period of time, then I would organize it into phases and stages, which I think the project management tools that Ashley mentioned are great for helping the group internally organize and plan. Maybe everyone has these phases and stages, and at certain points we check in the live sessions, and they go out into their breakout rooms and report back then on that phase of planning. So, you know, I can see how I'd be doing group work over a period of time. It wouldn't be just for 1 week. It would be a long-term collaborative project, and I'd be using those, you know, breakout rooms and sessions to check in. Anyway, I think that might be pretty obvious. I don't know.
Yeah. I want to be mindful of time, everybody. We are at time, and I know there's another session after this one. So we want to give you a chance to stretch, and hopefully you want to hang around for our next sessions. But we do want to, if you have questions, I'll hang around, and some of my co-hosts, I think, can hang around for a few minutes after this. So as folks pop up, if you have specific questions, you want to continue the Q&A, I'm happy to hang out and answer more. We will be sending out information to everybody who RSVP'd about how to access the recording once it becomes available, and other resources. So if you missed any of the links or things like that, you'll be able to follow up. You can also always email us at consult@teaching.ucla.edu, and we'd be happy to follow up with one-on-one questions if you have them. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.